Hi everybody, I'm your hot with Scott Kellner, and you are tuned in to Digital Mentorship. Digital Mentorship is a podcast designed to educate college, juniors, seniors, and current professionals about career possibilities. If you can think about what you wanted to do when you were declaring a major or getting ready to graduate, is that anything close to what you ended up doing? Do you think somebody else getting ready to graduate has any idea that a job or career or your business even exists? The goal of this podcast is to help narrow the gap between what individuals think their career must be and what it could be. Disclaimer time. Scott Kellner works in the private wealth management industry, and it's possible investments or securities are talked about in this podcast. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice.
Was the summer of the fall. I heard the gods of chaos call.
Hello and welcome to Digital Mentorship. I'm your host, You're Hot with Scott Kellner. My guest today is Weston Lackey. Weston graduated from Westminster College in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he studied finance, and he's currently a financial analyst at Daybreak Communities. Properties. Which one?
Daybreak Communities, you had it right.
Daybreak Communities. And Weston, thank you for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I really like what you got going on with the show, so I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. Weston, actually, he and I connected because he reached out to me after watching the first episode of the show. He was a friend of Harris and I, or mentored Harris and I a little bit. He had a lot of really nice comments to say, and I was super appreciative and flattered. And I asked him to come on the show, and here we are. And here we both are now. So, one of the, to start off the show, I always like to play this game, which is called Two Truths and a Lie. And you told me that you learned to ice skate when you were 3, which is pretty young to learn how to ice skate. You have 2 St. Bernards, which I don't see them running around behind you right now. So I don't know about that. And that you were kidnapped in Vietnam, which seems very random compared to the first 2. So that I feel like you're baiting me a little bit with that. I feel like you're baiting me with the being kidnapped in Vietnam. You're from Michigan. And so, I imagine hockey, I'm pretty sure hockey is a pretty big sport in Michigan. So I imagine that, so I'm going to go with you. You don't have 2 St. Bernards.
I don't have 2 St. Bernards.
Okay. So this is great, because this is going to be an interesting story, I think. Hopefully not a traumatizing one though. What is the deal with you getting kidnapped in Vietnam?
So yeah, I'll tell, there's definitely a long version, but I'll tell the short one, which is, so when I graduated, I went to Vietnam with a couple friends for a few weeks post-graduation before we started our full-time gigs. And middle of the night, we were leaving some bar in Vietnam, and they've kind of got this, it's sort of something I should have known about, but I wasn't aware of. I took a ride home from somebody on a moped. And they offer you a ride home. Hey, can I drive you back to your hotel? My friends had got back to the hotel already. And I was the last one, there. And I was like, yeah, awesome. That'd be great. Next thing you know, I've been on this moped for quite a while. Where are we going? Where are we going? Well, next thing you know, he's like, get off the moped. Give me some money, basically. And, really drove me out to the middle of nowhere and was like, give me money. I had no clue where I was. So yeah, it was pretty terrifying at the time. You don't really know where you're at and just trying to get back to the hotel. And it was crazy. Obviously everything turned out fine. I think I had to give them the equivalent of like $5 to go away. And it ended all good. But yeah, I truly did get kidnapped for a period of time there in Vietnam.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy, dude. Well, I'm glad that you lived to tell about it. And I assume you obviously made it back to the hotel in one piece that evening.
I did. I was pretty shaken up, actually. I didn't willingly just give him money right away because I didn't know what the heck was going on. But eventually when I figured out that's what he wanted, there's a bit of a language barrier there.
Yeah.
And when I figured that out, I was just like, I just went home. So it was fine. But, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show. And, so let's talk a little bit about how you ended up at Westminster. So you're from Michigan. and
Yep.
you told me that you were interested in coming out west, and you were originally you were going to tour the University of Utah, and somebody told you to check out Westminster College, and
Yeah.
then take the story from there. What happened?
Yeah. So I grew up in Michigan. I grew up playing hockey. I always loved to snowboard, but I was kind of limited in my ability to snowboard because I played competitive hockey growing up, same seasons, and they conflicted and everything. And so it was kind of always a dream to live out west at some point in my life. And where that was, I had no idea. I hadn't even taken a vacation west of the Mississippi like ever. So I did a tour, seeing some schools. And yeah, I was at the University of Utah doing a tour. Got a tip to check out Westminster College, went there, and surprisingly enough, I mean, I just really loved it. I liked the size. I liked the idea of being in small classes. I liked the feel of the campus. Got a fairly, they had some fairly good scholarships available. And so that's where I ended up. It was definitely not planned. I didn't know a ton about Westminster being from Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I just kind of found myself there through that path.
And then when you got to Westminster, you decided, did you know, I think you mentioned it in kind of like the pre-show notes, but you didn't necessarily know what you wanted to do when you first went to school.
No, I don't know if you did when you went to college, but when I went to college, I knew it was like the right thing to be doing.
Yeah.
It's finish high school, go to school. I'm not sure what I want to do next. But I know college is the right step. Getting a degree is going to be the right step, but I had no idea where I wanted to go. With that, so I started at Westminster. I started, kind of taking all the base classes you've got to take. I explored going into psych for a while. I really liked to write, and so I explored kind of doing something in English or journalism. And that was kind of the first year. My freshman year was just try everything out, see what you like. And then later, towards my freshman year, I was sort of starting to think about, okay, what kind of job do you get with this? And what does it take to get there? With psych, it was like, you probably need to do some more school to get a good job after a 4-year degree. Yeah. I wasn't fully prepared to do that. I was kind of, 4 years sounds like enough college for now.
You're either going to practice or you're going to teach.
Right.
And, I mean, I'm sure there's actually probably more careers or more things you can do with a psychology degree, but on like a very base kind of like ignorant level.
Exactly. The understanding I had at the time, I thought my options would be limited with a 4-year degree in psych. And I thought business was broad enough that, I could kind of go in any direction. Not to mention I couldn't go back to school and still pursue psych down the road if I wanted, or pursue some kind of journalism down the road if I wanted. But just at a high level, it seemed like, a business degree would be a good place to go. After 4 years, you can probably get a good job and start on a good career. So that's kind of how I chose business. I didn't choose finance until probably after sometime my sophomore year, when you start taking all of your entry-level business classes, your intro to marketing, intro to accounting, intro to finance, all those. I found finance most interesting, and it came easiest to me. I was very math heavy. I was pretty comfortable in math, and it seemed like the natural course of action, but I chose it fairly blindly, not knowing at all what that could mean in terms of careers. I knew, investment banking, and you could go work at a big bank, and then I kind of knew the accounting side of things, but I wasn't even exactly sure where it could take me. But I ended up choosing finance, and I'm glad I did. So.
And do you remember who your intro to finance professor was?
It was Rich Collins.
Rich Collins. I love Rich Collins, dude. He was my advisor, actually. He was my academic advisor, and he was my microeconomics professor. I think it was like intro to microeconomics, cool. Maybe just called microeconomics. And he was, so I briefly, kind of similar to you, I just went to college because I thought it was the right thing to do. I knew, it was my parents wanted me to do it. I knew it was the right thing to do. I didn't necessarily know what I was going to study when I got there, but I had a feeling it was going to be business. Both of my parents are business people. My father was an entrepreneur, and my mother actually worked at Goldman Sachs in New York, but now she actually worked at Westminster for a little while. That's part of one of the main reasons why I ended up going there. And then she works for the University of Utah now in fundraising. She's a development officer. And but I declared a major in economics because of Rich Collins, and then I took Intro to Finance with Lauren Leray, and I declared a double major because of Lauren. So, and cool. I know that's something that you're very passionate about, and kind of you mentioned already, is the small class sizes at Westminster and how professors can have an impact and influence you in that way because of the relationships that you can cultivate with them or make with them or have with them. And I mean, we've talked about your relationship with Rick Haskell. I think he was a professor that who showed up after I had left. I graduated from Westminster with my bachelor's in 2013, and I finished my master's degree there in the spring of 2016. But, maybe just talk a little bit about how the faculty helped you kind of through this process of declaring a major, maybe coming up with a job, or maybe, touch on the work that you did with Rick in the valuation challenge, and which I think is something super cool. You started this whole thing with Rick. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit about all of that stuff. This is a problem that I have with podcasting, dude, is I kind of like ask a question and then I ask another question. And all of a sudden I've asked 5 questions and now you don't know which one to answer. So I'm just going to.
Well, I get it. There's a lot there. No, I get it. So yeah, I agree. And you and I have talked about that a little bit, just how for me and kind of the way I learned, the small class sizes at Westminster really helped me feel engaged. They helped me feel accountable. And they also, they help you develop relationships with the professor. I mean, so my family from Michigan, a lot of people go to Michigan State in my family. Peter's friends go to Michigan State. Maybe
I wasn't sure if you were Wolverines or Spartans. I wasn't sure.
I'm a Spartan.
Okay.
Spartan fan, so. But yeah, I could have gone down that path, and I'm sure I would have been fine. I'm sure they're great schools, and everybody has their unique experience. But I am grateful I ended up going to Westminster just because, I mean, I had some really, really good influence from some great professors and mentors, and they were always willing to offer their time. Vicki Whiting, management professor, Lauren Leray, Rob Patterson, Matt Krause, Fred Healy, and definitely Rick. Big influences on my education. And, I did try to do whatever I could to participate outside of just what was required in terms of classes. Rick always had a lot of different things going on. I started with some of the May term classes at Westminster. Rick led a couple research projects during May term. So the valuation project and the power of multiples. I worked on both of those, and I worked on those before I had any fundamental understanding of finance at all. I just started working on them. It felt like a good thing to do. It felt like I was making the right connections, but I really didn't even fully understand how I was contributing at the time. In hindsight, they were really cool projects to work on and helped me kind of get my foundation in valuation expertise and just kind of understanding public equity markets and everything. So those were cool experiences. But yeah, I think, being this is the Digital Mentorship podcast, I just really encourage students or whoever might be listening to this to try to do as much of that as possible. And when I say that, I mean kind of extend yourself beyond what is expected of you in your basic curriculum and your credits to the extent you've got time. And overextend yourself at first and pull back if you need to. That might be bad advice, but that's kind of what I did. I kind of got myself involved in so many things that I had to pull back a little bit, but ultimately ended up being fruitful things for me to be involved in. you mentioned the valuation consultancy, which
Yeah.
is a really cool project I worked on with Rick Haskell. He set up these small companies in the Salt Lake area that we could actually do company valuations with.
Right.
And it was a relatively formal process for
Right.
just students. We went and sat down.
Just why did these companies need to be valued? Like what were they, it wasn't necessarily, were they going out to investors trying to raise capital?
So
Was it something, did they need to value like their privately held, like stock, like shares or something? Like maybe there were shares in this privately held company and maybe there was going to be some sort of like liquidity event. So they needed
right.
like a partner was getting bought out or like something like that. Like what was the point of these companies
So
being valued?
So typically, you hit the nail on the head. That's why you may need evaluation in a company. There's a number of reasons you might need evaluation. These companies, particularly, I think were more interested than anything. Rick worked with Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses and had access to some of these companies.
Right.
And I think he saw it as an opportunity for some students to get some practice.
Right.
These companies might get an idea of the valuation of their firm. I don't think they were really going to place much weight on the valuation that a bunch of students gave them.
Right.
But yeah, in reality, if you went to work for a valuation consultancy, after college and you went to work for a valuation firm, those are some of the things that a company might need evaluation for sure. For these specific companies, we were doing valuations. It was practice on both ends. And it was probably pretty cool for some of the companies to understand, well, given the cash flow that we're generating and the growth that we're projecting, here's what my company could be worth. So,
right.
So that was kind of cool.
I did a similar in my MBA project. We did a similar, or in my MBA program, we did a similar project for a small business up in North Salt Lake. And gosh, I can't remember the name of the business specifically, but they had a cool business where it was, they basically made the molds for the angel Moronis that they put on top of the churches, on top of the LDS temples, like the angel Moroni, and that was like a big part of their business and they hired us, a bunch of MBAs, because we had been studying, it was in a business processes class with Chadwick Dorton was our professor, and it's usually taught by Elise Morton, but and we read the book the Goal, which is a kind of an offshoot, or it's one of the book has actually got some bad press lately because it's kind of like it's a little bit sexist in the way some things are kind of like these roles are kind of like typecast in this book. So I'm not, I'm not trying to be controversial or anything, but I loved the book. I thought it was super great. And it's told in a parable. So they teach you these business management principles through like a parable. So like a story or a lesson. And it's all about, finding bottlenecks and improving processes and understanding like throughput, inventory times throughput times time, is kind of like your production equation. That was kind of like what the class was all about. And so this company hired us, or not hired, but allowed us to come in, look at their processes, and try to come up with some recommendations for how they could improve things, how they can improve their inventory management, how they could maybe cut down on cost or waste. And I thought it was a cool experience to, I think, work with a small business that's part of the local community. And yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know how much they got out of it, but I know we got a lot out of it.
Right.
And so I think it's great when, professors or, some place like Westminster or whatever provides students the opportunity to connect with businesses in kind of like a real world setting. Outside of the classroom, I think can be some of the best learning opportunities. And,
I got a lot out of it in that same way. I think just working with, a real company, small business that's operating in the local community in Salt Lake. And it just it took things out of the textbook and took things into practice. And there's a little bit more nuance there. everything's not as cookie cutter as it is in the textbook.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really cool experience. But yeah, just going back to that overall at Westminster, because it is so small, you're allowed to just get so immersed in as much as you possibly want. And I'm sure other schools have those opportunities as well, but I'm definitely grateful for that. And I can't be grateful enough for working with Rick on a lot of these things. He put lended so much of his own time for these extra projects that ultimately just helped his students. And I've still got a great relationship with Rick. Helps me out with all sorts of things.
You told me when you come into town, you guys go out to dinner together.
Yeah. We usually grab a meal when I'm in town. But pre-COVID, I was traveling. I'm in Michigan now, but
yeah,
pre-COVID, I was traveling out to Salt Lake about a week out of every month. So I haven't been out there for work in almost a year now.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into, what are you doing now? You work for Daybreak Communities.
Yep.
What is Daybreak Communities?
So Daybreak Communities. We are a real estate developer manager, and we develop master plan communities. The most notable one is Daybreak in South Jordan. So if you're familiar with Utah, you and I have talked about this a bit. But Daybreak in South Jordan is one of the largest property that we manage, and it's a master plan community, meaning it's basically started in 2003 as 4,000 acres of raw, unimproved land, no utilities, no roads, no homes, businesses, anything out there. And it's basically ground up development across all real estate asset classes. So that's the company I work for now. Daybreak has been around for a long time. It's pretty substantial presence in the valley. If you go out to Daybreak, it doesn't feel new at all. There's definitely a lot of new construction going on, but it's definitely a more matured community. So my role, I'm a financial analyst. I work on Daybreak itself, on some of the operations side of things, pricing land for asset sales, managing our development costs and the financing of some of those development costs, and future kind of land planning exercises of what's going to happen next in Daybreak. Where are we building what? Yeah. When is it going to be built? What's needed? What's the market demanding? What are we missing here? And trying to kind of fill all the segments. So I work closely with the actual operations side of the assets we manage, but I also, a big part of the work that I do, maybe more than half of it, is actually on underwriting and acquisitions of new land, and then sales of our existing land as well. So that's kind of the high level overview of Daybreak. But
I think one of the super cool things that kind of like about your job is essentially, I don't think a lot of people realize that you can study finance. And then, Daybreak Communities is obviously a massive place, but I bet the company itself is probably not that big. It can't be more than 100 employees.
Oh, way less, 20.
Right.
Yeah.
So, by head count, Daybreak Communities is gigantic in terms of it's in, the number of houses and the number of, but in terms of head count and a company itself, it's kind of small. And I don't think a lot of people realize that you can, hold on a second, I'm going to shut my door.
Yep.
Should have done that before I started the show. That's all right.
No worries.
I don't think a lot of people realize that you can study finance and then go work in sort of a corporate finance. I would call that a corporate finance role, where you are working inside of a company doing financial stuff.
I find it to be, I find that to be really cool too about my role. And it's so intimidating when you're starting to look for careers in finance. What can I do and where can I go and what's that going to look like and what's my day to day?
Because I think back to the psychology example, it's you think about a career in finance, it's you're either going to work at a bank or you're going to manage somebody's money.
Yep.
Right. That's kind of what you think you can do.
You can, yeah, exactly. You can go into like the private wealth management or financial advisor type of role, or you can go work at Goldman Sachs
Right.
and
And other
that's
banks and whatever.
right. And other banks. Yeah.
Okay. But there is
And
kind of like this lane or this niche of like working
yeah,
for small companies.
yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. I found myself, if I were to describe myself, I would say I'm sort of more of an unconventional finance student and
Yeah.
I say that in the way, not because I don't think they're great job opportunities, but just because I know myself and I know what I like. I never had interest in working for a big company, whether it's finance or not. I'm sure there are a ton of benefits there, and I'm sure there's some downsides, just like there are for a small company, benefits and downsides. But I know myself well enough to know that I would thrive in a small company where my role might be a little bit more dynamic. My day to day is not going to be the same. I'm working on a lot of different projects, and I think you're right. I think to an extent, my role is definitely sort of a corporate finance type role. What's really cool about it as well, on the other side of things, is we work closely with different capital providers to tie up new land and do new
Yeah.
acquisitions. And so I kind of get to look at, the operations side, the corporate finance side of things, but I also do quite a bit of work in like the acquisitions and disposition side of the business as well. And I would have had no idea there would have been a role like this even when I was applying. I didn't even know what I was applying for at that time. It's just one of those things where you're a finance student and you think about everything through the lens of the experiences that you've had, and you don't even know what really could be out there. So I'm an advocate of the small businesses. I know a lot of my friends have had really good experiences working for big companies as well. So I don't want to by any means say don't go do that, because if it's for you, then it might work out. So
Well, I think the important thing that you said, in terms of people working at big companies or working at small companies or whatever, was you knew inside yourself what you wanted, and you had that reflect, you had that self-reflection to know, and then you pursued that, and which I think is the most important thing. I mean, I think so much about having a successful career has to do with knowing yourself and following your passion. I mean, the guy that I interviewed yesterday, Jackson Perry, is one of the most passionate guys I know about customer success management. I mean, he can talk about it. That's why it was a super long episode. I mean, we talked for well over an hour, and I loved it because, you can tell that the guy just has a really good idea of who he is and what he wants to do and what he's good at and what he's passionate about. And he's done a good job of, even though he's done a lot of different things in his career, he's been able to infuse his passion in everything that he does. And so I think that's, and you did the same thing. You knew that you were passionate about small business, and you took the skills and the knowledge that you learned in school, and you're applying those in the real world now, and in a way that makes sense to you, which I think is super important and awesome. And so now I kind of wanted to talk, maybe we can kind of rewind the tape a little bit, because I know, you have a take, or you have, an opinion on internships, about getting internships. You did this internship with Rick. I mean, that was an internship, right? Like, did he call it an internship, the University Valuation Challenge thing?
no, it wasn't an internship thing. There may have been some students that used it as their internship if they hadn't already had an internship. I had a different one, so I didn't need the credits.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that though. For me, it wasn't considered an internship, right? I didn't consider
it was just
that.
an extracurricular project.
A research associate kind of thing, but yeah.
Right. And so what was your first internship when you were in school? What was your first internship?
So I did an internship with Alliance Residential Group, which was a property management company. And I was a finance student looking for a finance internship. And, going back to kind of the the high level, thinking about this podcast and the reach that it may have, the digital mentorship. I think what's so cool about the story that you told, about your last episode, the customer experience specialist and myself, I think what people can gain from hearing these different stories is everybody does have different preferences, and everybody does have a different lane, based on their skill sets and their preferences. And I think a lot of times, especially in finance, you might feel a little bit trapped by what your peers are doing. Well, did you apply for this internship yet? Or this bank's deadline for their internships is by this date. Did you get your application in or did you not? And a lot of the big companies can work that way, and you might feel like, well, maybe I should have done that, but you don't have to, certainly do it if you want to, but it's just, I think hearing other people's experiences is so beneficial, and I hope that that's something that people can get out of this podcast. So that's why I'm super appreciative that you're doing it. I'm glad to be here. But yeah, going back to my experience, Alliance Residential Group, I was looking for a finance internship. I had some interest in real estate, so I took Fred Healy. He was an adjunct professor. I took his real estate course at Westminster, thought real estate was really cool. I thought it was sort of an unconventional way to get into the finance space as well. And I also found it interesting that there's a lot of private capital in real estate and not a lot of public capital, meaning most all real estate deals done are not from, stuff that's publicly traded or anything like that. Right. And I found that to be something really cool. There's a lot of inefficiencies and imperfect markets that you can capitalize on, especially as things are constantly changing. And there's sort of a creation component to real estate where you're building things from the ground up. There's sort of a creative aspect to it as well. But I had a little bit of interest in real estate, but definitely didn't know that's where I wanted to end up in my career. Took this internship with Alliance Residential, where I was effectively a property manager at a downtown Salt Lake apartment community that was brand new. So it was a lease-up community. Basically, the summer I worked there, it went from like having 0 tenants in any of the places to 100 plus. And this is like a 200 unit apartment building downtown Salt Lake on, I think it's 5th East and 3rd South-ish, that area. And while I was there, I just asked all the time, can I go to this due diligence walkthrough with these people? The owners are here. Can I participate in this? And I tried to glean any amount of expertise I could, but really, I was leasing apartments, dealing with, construction related things, and that was it. And I thought it was not necessarily my first choice at the time, but it ultimately ended up being the perfect choice for me, because when the opportunity with Daybreak came about, 6 months later, they needed someone with real estate experience. Yeah. And I had just enough through that internship to check the box. So I was happy with it.
And I know that you're getting the job at Daybreak was kind of, also unconventional in the sense that it was a full-time role and you were still in school.
Yeah.
So talk about maybe, what that was like, how you guys came to an agreement, and even like the work from home thing.
Yeah. Yep. So I started with Daybreak in October of 2017 and I graduated May 2018. At the time, Rick Pascal sent me the job posting that he had found out about somehow. And the highlights were discounted cash flow experience and real estate experience, but entry-level financial analyst. It did not say on the job posting part-time or internship or anything. It was just a job listing. And I had discounted cash flow experience from the valuation projects I'd done with Rick. I had the real estate experience from Alliance I had just talked to you about. Yeah. Good enough to at least throw my name in a hat. And I'm sure, at least I believe Rick might have reached out for me. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But But I got myself an interview. They had me do a little bit of an analysis, like a Excel spreadsheet type of thing. But yeah, it was a full-time position they were looking to fill in October. And I wasn't going to be graduating for, 7 months. And I applied anyway, went in and interviewed. And I remember communicating that to the person face to face. I thought I communicated it through an email or through my application, but I got there and they were like, okay, so when would you be able to start? I was like, well, I can really only work part-time now. I've got light class loads. I was kind of ahead in my last couple semesters. I only needed I was taking the minimum amount of credits I needed to take because in my classes were a lot of electives and stuff at that point. But, they were looking for a full-time role. I applied. They felt like I was a good fit. I felt like it was going to be a good opportunity for me to have a part-time, good paying job while I'm in school. And they kind of changed what they were looking for. They weren't finding a good full-time hire, and they thought that I might be a good fit for the role. And so they offered me the job knowing that, they could try me out until May, and then maybe they would get a full-time employee, and then I could try them out until May, and it would kind of be a mutually beneficial thing. And so that's what we ended up doing. So I worked, part-time throughout my whole senior year, then ended up going on full-time in May, and it was a really good deal. It ended up working out. I mean, I'm still working with the company, so I'm glad that it transpired that way. But I mean, not all companies will do that. Obviously, a small company might have more leverage to do something like that than a big one. But I mean, I encourage people to do that. In January, if you're graduating in May or December and there's a job you see, apply and say, hey guys, I can start now and work 25, 30 hours until I graduate, and then I can go. And they might just be like, no, we need someone full-time tomorrow, but they might not. So you just don't close those doors for yourself just because it says full-time and we need it now. I mean, my experience kind of speaks to that a little bit.
And then you were kind of able, so I mean, I think, you were able to negotiate a kind of a role for yourself, in kind of maybe I feel kind of like an unconventional sense. And then you were also able to negotiate working from home. So talk about, how that came about and why you decided to do that.
Yeah, so Daybreak is based in South Jordan. I was still living in Salt Lake at the time when I graduated. And I worked out there for, about a year. And then it would have been the summer, I believe, of 2019. So about a year plus a little bit after graduation, I decided that I wanted to move back to Michigan. I had just been, living in Utah, going to school and working for 5-ish years. And I was kind of missing being home. And I thought that I wanted to maybe establish my career more in Michigan. And I guess I just wanted to get back to home. Really, that's all it was. So I kind of made that conscious decision. I came to my company and basically told them I was going to have to leave. I actually did formally submit my 2 weeks. And then my company's like, whoa, pump the brakes. What's going on? Did you get another job? Where's this coming from? There were some other transitions going on in my company at the time. And I was like, no, I absolutely love working for you guys. This is literally a geographical constraint. I need and want to be home with my family right now. And just be back in Michigan. It's where I physically want to be. I would love working for you guys. And if I could work there and work for you guys, I would. And they said, well, let's try it, at least for a period of time. And I think it was initially presented to me, let's try this for 3 months, where you can go home. You're not going to be moving across the country without a job. We're not going to be losing a valuable employee who has a lot of productivity for us. And so this is going to work, again, mutually beneficial. We'll keep an employee. You'll keep your job. You can move home. We'll reassess in 3 months. 3 months went by. We never talked about it. 6 months went by. We never talked about it. And then COVID. And so everyone's working remotely and everyone's still working remotely.
Yeah.
So I got a 6-8 month head start on all of it for sure. I was working remotely before everybody else, but now we sort of live in a world where if you don't need to be there, I mean, obviously companies are continually adapting how they feel about office space and being physically present. And there's a lot of differing opinions about productivity, but I can tell you personally, I'm extremely productive working at home, and it would be hard to have it any other way at this point for me. So.
I've enjoyed being able to work from home. Do you have any tips for working from home? Like do you make lists? Do you have like a separate office space? What do you feel like in your experience has worked well for you?
I've got a separate office space. I think there's some little things that help a lot. Try to stick to a routine a little bit. So don't, my work schedule, just the nature of the work that I do is it doesn't need to be done in super regimented hours, but I try to keep it that way as much as I can, just because I think it just helps get up early, kind of have a little bit of a routine. I think making sure you're still moving around sounds like something little, but when you're in the office, you go grab lunch and you go, walk to the printer or I don't know, you go talk to other people and do things, and you move your computer for meetings, and you walk to the conference room and you do all these different things, but you can end up just sitting in one place a lot when you're working from home. So I think moving around a lot is good. I stole this from one of my buddies, Alex Mazzeo, but I got a balance board in my office.
Oh, cool.
If I'm on a conference call where I don't need to be sitting in front of a computer, I need to be listening and maybe talking, pop in the headphones and stand on the balance board and,
yeah.
and take the call there. But I found it to be quite easy, honestly, to be really productive. I've always been a list person, and I know some people, they need a little bit of oversight to be productive, or they need the nudge, from their manager. And I've sort of been always the opposite of that. I'm kind of a self-starter, and so the work from home environment works well for me. So.
I also I'm trying to be better about when I'm in a meeting or a phone call or something. And I know and I need to kind of, like you said, like I need to just listen and maybe talk, but not necessarily take notes or whatever. If I'm sitting at my computer, I'm still messaging people or responding to emails. I am totally disengaged from whatever conversation is happening because I'm distracted because I'm sitting at my computer. So I've been trying to kind of similar. We have a stationary bike. We have like a home gym.
Nice.
I might go ride the bike. Like I might go do an easy pedal on the bike while I'm listening or like that. Just because it's easier for me to have nothing's in front of me, it's easier.
Of course, only those meetings you don't need the webcam on though.
Right.
You need to be on the balance board just
right. The last one I was on, they were like, Scott, your camera's off. Like, why? And I just lied. I said it wasn't working. I didn't want to tell them I was going for a walk around the block. Although I'm sure if I explained to them what I just said, like I'm going for a walk around the block so I can actually pay attention, because if I sit at my computer, I'm not going to be listening to what you guys are saying. But maybe they'll listen to this podcast and now they'll understand. So I told you at the beginning of this that I wanted to try something new.
Yeah.
And this will kind of like be a segue to the end of the show, but we're going to play overrated and underrated with Weston Lackey. You ready? Just kind of, you can comment on it, but this is supposed to kind of go fast. So college education.
Underrated.
Real estate.
Underrated.
Spartan football.
Underrated.
Wolverine football.
Overrated.
Mock interviews.
Underrated.
New York style pizza.
Overrated.
Apples. Like the fruit.
Underrated.
Underrated. Bitcoin.
Underrated.
Podcasts.
Properly rated.
Properly rated. Right on. Well, that was all I got. So that was overrated, underrated with Weston Lackey.
I
Very
like
good.
that.
That
I
was
like
fun.
that. So do I get a chance to opine on any of those?
Yeah, sure. You could. Yeah, you can comment
I've
on it.
got two on one.
What is it?
And the New York style pizza thing, I don't and I never will understand it. It's good, but maybe I haven't had the best. I haven't been to New York, so I probably haven't had the best. But I mean, yeah, I don't get it. And especially because I like all different kinds of pizza, but I love Chicago style pizza.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
tell somebody like the deep dish Chicago style pizza, if you tell a New Yorker that that's good pizza, that's not pizza.
That's not pizza. Okay. I mean, that's. I'll tell you. I have a joke about different kinds of pizza. I'll tell you after the podcast. So, pivoting, I guess, a little bit to, kind of the end of the show. This is usually where I ask for, kind of like, what advice do you think you would give yourself? If you were looking back, or somebody who's trying to think about starting a career, what advice would you have for that person?
It's kind of open-ended, but I think just keep doing kind of all of the right things and, start building momentum for yourself. Create good relationships with your professors, create good relationships with students you work with. And it sounds so cliche, but you just never know when one of those people will be the person that helps you get a job, or you might help them get a job. And I think making good impressions and being really, really intentional with your time when you're a student is super important. And I also just not shying away from opportunities either. Don't say I'm not going to apply for this job because I don't think it's exactly what I'm looking for. Apply for it. If you get an interview, take the interview as practice. Just kind of, not everything has to have a direct, here was my effort and here's what I got out of it. But I just think building that momentum of doing the right things as much as possible, it always does come back around. In my opinion. And I know that's not super direct advice to give somebody. It's kind of open-ended, but I do believe that just kind of optimize your time while you're in school and take advantage of the extracurricular stuff, build the relationships with professors and other students, and be really intentional with your time, at least as much as you can be. And also don't be afraid to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask the questions and use your network. I mean, you probably have a stronger network than you think. Like I made connections with my parents' friends and things who have professional careers that have been very successful. And, you just go to dinner with them, have a call. I mean, just connect with people. And I think that's one thing I think this podcast will do is, when you can open your mind to different perspectives and different paths, you never really know where you're going to kind of land. And I think the more doors you open for yourself is a good thing. So
I don't know if you've heard this saying, but I feel like it's I've heard it from real estate people. So I don't know if it's something that's only said in real estate circles or what, but your network is your net worth. Is something that I hear, that I've heard a lot of like real estate people say. But I think it's super applicable to every kind of career. And I think your advice about taking the time and building those relationships and really connecting with people is really important. And well, Weston, I think we've covered just about everything. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'll make sure to give you the show notes, when it gets ready, when it comes out. But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on. And I wish the best for you for the show. I think you're doing a lot of good stuff, so I appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks, Weston. We'll talk to you next time.
Yep.
Big thank you to Weston Lackey for coming on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation about his experience at Westminster College and how he decided on a field of study. Weston is the second person I've interviewed who participated in the University Valuation Group, which ties into his advice about the importance of participating in extracurriculars. Weston and I play a game of overrated and underrated, and he provides good insight into people getting ready to graduate from college. If you are interested in corporate finance or pursuing a career as a financial analyst for a small company, feel free to reach out to Weston on LinkedIn. He will be happy to help you. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
It was the springtime of winter.